AM 1460, the new WXBR. You were listening to the Metro South Morning Program. Peter Zimbor here with you on this Tuesday morning. Joining me right now via the telephone is the Vice President of Exhibits and Archives for Ripley's Entertainment. He's a historian of the unique, the weird, and the absurd. He's a big part of the new book, Ripley's Believe It or Not, Dare to Look. He is Mr. Edward Meyer. Edward, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having Ripley's on this morning.
Is a historian of the unique, the weird, and the absurd a good way to describe your occupation?
Well, that's not too bad. Title-wise, I'm the Vice President of Exhibits and Archives, which really means I do look after our history and try to build our future at the same time. So a little bit of everything. Chief cook and bottle washer is how I usually describe myself.
Well, describe what your job exactly entails. How do you gather up all these weird, bizarre artifacts, stories, and freakish stuff for books like Ripley's Believe It or Not, Dare to Look, and also the many museums that Ripley's has throughout the country?
Yeah, there's two different parts to my job and, fundamentally to the company as well. We have 32 auditoriums around the world, 10 different countries, in which we feature unbelievable exhibits. And these were started by the collection of Robert Ripley, who was a real guy, a newspaper illustrator, who became the modern Marco Polo. He traveled to 201 countries collecting items to prove to people that were calling him the world's biggest liar, to prove to them that the things that he was putting in his books and in his newspaper cartoon were, in fact, real. I'll draw a cartoon of a picture of somebody's shrunken head from Ecuador or South America, and people will say, I don't believe it. There are no such thing as shrunken heads. Goes to Ecuador, he brings it back. At some point, the collection is big enough that he can open actual museums, which he called auditoriums, to display his collection. So that's one part of it, and today, many years after Ripley died, that is my main function. I'm the guy that's carrying on after Robert Ripley, acquiring things for our museums.
So how do you go about finding these bizarre things to put in museums and put in publications like Dare to Look? Do you just travel the world? Do people tip you off? There's something interesting like this here. Describe the process if there in fact is one.
Yeah, if there is one, that's a good phase, because there might seem to be no such pattern. All of the above is the real answer. I'm quite well traveled, so we do go to places to find stuff. In particular, we've usually done a little bit of research to say it's there in the first place. We're not just wandering around randomly.
You never had an Al Capone's vault moment?
No.
Okay.
But things come to us. People call us constantly. We've been in business for 95 years, so if somebody has a two-headed cow born on their farm, or finds a copy of the Declaration of Independence in their attic, chances are we're going to be the first people they call to see if we're interested and see if we can tell them, if we're not, who is. And we have a research team here in Orlando, Florida, as well as one in London, where our books like Dare to Look are made, and we are constantly looking everywhere. It's TV shows, it's magazines, it's websites, it's individual letters from people. But believe it or not, material literally can be found anywhere. And I'm at a point in my career, 35 years here. I don't even look for it; it just comes to me. I have a very hard time reading a book or newspaper without underlining things and say, hey, this could be a believe it or not.
Now, the company has been in business for 90-plus years. You have been with the company for 30-plus years, as you just mentioned. What's the most unique item you have ever come across in the history of the company, and what is the most unique item you have ever come across yourself when it comes to gathering material for these publications and for Ripley's museums?
Oh, boy. Well, the second part of your question is very hard to answer. The first part varies a little bit depending on my mood, I guess. But one of my favorites, and certainly one I don't ever think we're going to see a second one, we bought a two-trunked African elephant head about 8 years ago now in Botswana. And it's got two fully functional trunks, each over 5 foot tall and about 30 inches around, one laying over top of the other. So they're not side by side. Depending on what angle you look at the elephant's head, you wouldn't even notice the second one because it's completely, covered up by the top one. But, animal oddities have a long history with our company, and, our book here, Dare to Look, has all kinds, including a Cyclops goat, which is pretty strange. But, most animal oddities are domestic animals. To find one in the wild is very rare, and certainly to find one as big as an elephant is exceptional. I highly doubt we'll ever see anything like it. I'll retire or go to my grave as it being my, number one oddity of all time. That said, my holy grail is I'm still looking for something with three heads. We've had two-headed cows, pigs, ducks, foxes, deers, everything you could name we've seen or acquired at one point, but we've never heard of anything that had three heads other than in Greek mythology. So that's something we're still looking for.
When you are gathering things such as the things that you've mentioned thus far, how do you place a value on what they're worth when you have to buy them, considering they're items that are just so unique?
Also a very good question. Of course, the owner always thinks it's worth $1 million. That inevitably is the starting point. If we have something, and two-headed cows are probably a fairly good example, or shrunken heads, both cases, we probably have the biggest collections in the world. So farmer has a two-headed cow, and he may have never seen another one, so he thinks it's worth $1 million. He contacts me, and he's hoping to get rich, and I say, well, yes, I'm interested in it, but, I already have 102 of them. It's not worth $1 million to me. Typically, they hang up the phone, angry, mad at me, going, oh, what's he know? And then about a month later, they call back and say, is that $5,000 you offered still on the board? Because there's not a whole lot of other people that'll buy them at any price.
Now, is there just a whole bunch of two-headed cows you have living together? You guys have them hanging out together, just living somewhere?
Well, we have a warehouse here in Orlando, Florida. And I said earlier, we have 32 museums. Not every one of those museums has a two-headed cow, but quite a few of them do. If we see something that we think is unusual, unbelievable, we acquire it and put it in our warehouse until we need it. And two-headed cows, despite that we've got a lot of them, are very rare. We maybe hear of 2, 3 a year. If you think of all the number of cows there is in the world, it's 1 in a billion sort of oddity. So we buy it whether we have a spot for it right away or not, put it in our warehouse. The next time we have a spot, we can take it off the shelf and put it on display.
Once again, we're chatting with Edward Meyer, the VP of Exhibits and Archives for Ripley's Entertainment. He's here discussing the new Ripley's publication, Ripley's Believe It or Not, Dare to Look. Ed, what is the most expensive item that Ripley's has ever purchased? You mentioned that a lot of stuff people immediately overvalue and overprice because it's unique to them, while it may not be unique to your company that gathers all this weird crap. Is there ever been anything that's just been so unique that you guys have paid, at 7 figures for example? And what was it?
Well, we certainly never call anything crap, but the most expensive thing that we have ever bought, I've got a picture of it right above this telephone that I'm talking on, sold by Sotheby's Auctions in June of 1985, John Lennon's psychedelic hippie gypsy painted Rolls-Royce, Silver Cloud Rolls-Royce, bright yellow with a bunch of flowers on it. Estimated price was $200,000. Right above the picture and the page from the auction catalog, I have our bill for $2,299,000.
And what was it about that item that made you guys want it so much? Just the fact that it was Lennon's?
Well, that's the main reason for sure, but it's also uniquely painted that it is very much a one-of-a-kind piece. The Beatles, certainly iconic, certainly interesting to pop culture, and in this case, the car's got great interest to car enthusiasts too. But the real answer to your question is that we wanted it for a very specific reason, and we were willing to pay whatever it took to get it at that point. If I had to buy it, a year later, I wouldn't have paid that much money for it. And I had to pay for it today, I'd probably pass altogether.
What was the specific reason at the time you wanted it so badly?
Well, we were doing a memorial to John Lennon in Vancouver, Canada. We had created a wax figure of him, and we really wanted to put the wax figure in front of the car. And when it went on sale, we figured it would go for around the 200,000 mark. I can't remember the exact number, but the auction actually opened considerably higher than their estimate right to start with. They had so many hidden phone bids. So we just said, hey, we're in it to keep it, and so we went for it.
Now that was an item that might not be abnormal. It's abnormal to have because no one else would have it but you. But it's not like a freak of nature. Is there anything that is just so naturally weird and bizarre that you guys purchased for top dollar that you can think of outside of the John Lennon car?
Well, there's certainly been all kinds. In general, we're buying historical, cultural pieces at auction. And, sometimes you get them for what they're estimated at, but usually they go higher. Another piece that I'm very proud of our having is the matched pair of John Wilkes Booth Derringer that was on his person when he shot Abraham Lincoln. It turned out that the other gun is the one that actually used to kill Lincoln. But this one is kind of cool historically because it fell out of his vest when he jumped over the stage from the seat onto the stage and broke his ankle. And it fell out of his pocket and was taken right from the site of the murder. So for almost 100 years, well, actually over 100 years, 105 years, people believed that it was the actual murder weapon. And it wasn't until the early 1970s that modern ballistics, modern then, proved that it was the other gun that was found on his body several days later in the woodshed that had actually been the murder weapon, because they can see I'm not sure what the word is, striations, I think it's what it's called, of the bullet, the way it goes through the barrel, and be able to match a bullet to the barrel of a gun perfectly, which obviously they couldn't do in 1865.
Let's talk about the new edition of the Dare to Look book from Ripley's Believe It or Not. What stories, articles, and items which appear in this encyclopedia, if you will, really stand out to you this year?
Well, there's 256 pages, 2,500 stories, almost 600 great color photos. It's an oversized coffee table type book. It's actually the 10th in this series. Now, we've been making books since 1929, so we've got probably about 300 by this time. But for the last 10 years, we've put out a premium all-color coffee table style book as a gift-giving type item this time of year. October, November is when it first comes out. I have several favorites. Start with a couple photographs. Body modification is a big thing around Ripley's. You see it everywhere you go these days, people doing strange things. Page 43, we have an elderly Chinese woman that has changed her face fairly drastically as a cultural thing of beauty. And she's flattened the bridge of her nose, extended her nostrils, the size of tennis balls practically, and they are so large that they overlap her mouth. It almost looks like she doesn't have a mouth. And this is one of the most graphic pictures I think we've ever produced, and certainly one that you cannot believe someone would do this purposely to their body. So that is real body modification. If you go to page 193, same sort of gut response when you see the picture, but if you don't read the caption, you would think this young girl has 4 eyes. It's absolutely stunning photograph. A couple smaller ones where she also has a zipper up her back and some buttons up her stomach and shoelaces up her foot. But this is not actual body modification. This is strictly body paint. And until you read the caption, and because it's Ripley's, you assume right away, you flip the page, you assume it's a real picture of a 4-eyed girl. So you got to read it to understand what it is. But those 2 pictures are probably my favorite 2 pictures in the book. My absolute favorite story, and you'll have to bear with me here at half a second, see if I can find the page number for you. It's fairly early in the book.
I'll just tell you right now, the woman...
Page 31.
Page 31, okay.
Buried alive in a frozen car for 2 months. And I mentioned off air before we went on that I've got a little bit of a cold now, and I apologize for that. I just came back from Toronto, Canada, and got caught in the worst snow blizzard I've been in many years. But it has nothing against Peter Skillberg, 44, in Sweden last year, 2012, spent from December 19th to 11 to February 17th to 12, stuck inside a car completely buried in snow with temperatures as low as minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Had a little bit of supplies when he first got into trouble, but for most of the time he survived by eating snow. And two pictures in the book. One shows the car from the outside, one shows the car from the inside, and it's just one big snow pile.
I will tell you right now, that picture of the woman with her nose plugged up to the size of tennis balls, as you mentioned, it gives you new perspective on those kids with the gauges in their ear. Maybe it's not so bad after all, considering this woman made her nose.
At least in the side of your face, you don't have to stare at it. But if you're looking at someone with stretched nostrils, you're looking them in the eye, and I don't know. It's a haunting picture.
I love on page 31 with the picture of Peter Skillberg, who survived 2 months in this frozen car. Looks like underneath you guys have more articles or more little stories about people who have survived similar predicaments or been involved in bizarre predicaments where people thought they were dead. I love this one right there. 6 days after she was pronounced dead at the day of her funeral, a 95-year-old from China stunned villagers by pushing open the lid of her coffin, climbing out, and cooking herself dinner. Only in Ripley's do you find stories like that.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of typical of our writing style. 3 or 4 lines, a short paragraph. The book is not really meant to be read, cover to cover. It's the kind of thing you put it down, pick it up at any page, and find something that's kind of amazing. And it really should appeal to all ages. There's different chapters. The book's laid out chapter-wise, so if you want to read about sports, you can go straight to sports. If you want to go to the really gruesome section on weird foods that people eat, you can go straight there. But, we assume that you won't read it cover to cover, so every single page is packed with something that's going to catch your attention. And, we're really big into social media, that we want you to, respond to the book on Twitter or Facebook and tell your friends about, what pictures you think are the best or what story you think is the weirdest. This book, a little different than our previous ones. I just mentioned social media. We have a free telephone, iPad, iPhone app that you can download called OddScan, Ripley's OddScan. And then there's 18 pages within the book that have a bright red and green logo that says OddScan. You click on those logos, you will get hidden content, whole extra material. One of them is a whole chapter, 16 pages worth of material that you don't see in print form, but you get to take home and then, email to your buddies or put on your Facebook page. And typically, what you're getting in the OddScan is video. So, for instance, on page 146, 147, we have an artist named Ian Cook who paints a psychedelic, I guess is a good word, but an action photo of a car, in this case an Austin Mini, using robotic cars as his paintbrush. He puts the paint on the paper and drives, hand-controlled, remote-controlled cars through the paint to create a picture of a car. So in the book, you got the nice finished product. Click on the OddScan, you actually see video of how he does it. So it's kind of cool. Other good examples, page 172, 173, we got a very strange behavior. Kevin Mercado puts 161 clothes pegs on his face. Now, the picture in the book is pretty cool, but again, click on the OddScan, you see video of how he actually does it. You see him take the clothes pegs off, and you see what a mess his face looks like when he's finished. And both those two stories were filmed at our location, so we know, we had some control over the actual video, and we could swear 100% that what you see is what you get.
Once again, the book is Ripley's Believe It or Not, Dare to Look. We're chatting with Edward Meyer, the VP of Exhibits and Archives for Ripley's Entertainment. Ed, whatever happened to the Ripley's TV show Ripley's Believe It or Not, which existed, I believe, once in the 80s and then early in the portion of the new millennium? That was a show that I enjoyed watching. Whatever happened to the show, and is there any way it'll come back?
Well, whatever happened is what happens to any TV show that's no longer on. The ratings slipped, and once ratings slip, advertising slips, and suddenly you can't afford to keep it on the air. The first show was run on 1980 to 1984 with Jack Palance as the host. It was on ABC. Great show. Did very well for 3 years. Fourth year, they moved the time zone, and it went against the very popular Bill Cosby show and absolutely plummeted. Today, a lot of people still remember how well Jack said, believe it or not, in his eerie voice, and many, many people thought that he was actually Robert Ripley. He literally owned the product for 4 years. 20 years later, we came back to TV with Dean Cain, who also played Superman on a TV show, and that may have been his biggest hit. And we tried to recreate the same sort of feel. Obviously, 20 years later, it's a little more modern, different approach. But same thing with a host going to different places and revealing different stories. And it is still on sci-fi stations in syndication, but it also ran for 4 years, 2000 to 2004. So it's been 9 years since we've had a new TV show. We're always trying to get back on TV, and I sincerely hope that we will in 2014. But I don't think we would do the same kind of show anymore. We'd be looking for a whole different format. But it is, I'm glad you asked the question, but it's probably the question I get asked more than any other is, because TV changed our business. And, the Dean Cain show, just as an example, came out right when email started to really take off. And our website, which gets a few million hits a year, actually got more hits 10 years ago when we had a TV show than it does now. It's just you reach so many people through television. It affects our museum attendance. It affects our book sales. It just is the absolute best way to get your name out there, and it's all about branding. So we're dying to get back on TV as soon as we can.
And I'm sure that you guys have a lot of content ready to go on television if need be, due to a lot of the extra video content with the app and things of that nature.
And we get people, seriously, every day writing to us, I can do this, this, and this. Can I be on your TV show? And it breaks their heart when you tell them, we don't have a TV show. What you're looking at is reruns. And, yeah, we love your story, but, if we get a TV show, we'll put you on there. But for now, we got to just put you in the book, I'm afraid.
Well, that's Edward Meyer, VP of Exhibits and Archives for Ripley Entertainment. Ripley's Believe It or Not, Dare to Look. The book is in stores now and available on Amazon.com and other places like that. Edward, any final words for our listeners before I let you go this morning?
Final word. Well, I said it a little minute ago. It makes a great gift. We deliberately come out this time of year because it's a wonderful present for any age group. And, we market, fundamentally with teenage boys in mind, and they are the hardest group to get to read. So we're always getting good feedback from teachers and librarians that this is the kind of product young boys, can't get enough of. So if you got a young boy on your Christmas gift list, this will fill the void. Dare to Look. Buy it at Amazon.com, Ripleys.com, Ripley's Museums, wherever fine books are sold. Department stores like Costco and Walmart probably sell it a little bit cheaper than the bookstores do. That's Edward Meyer joining us here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. Edward, thank you so much for joining us this morning. All right. Well, thank you. Again, I apologize for the hoarseness of my voice. But thanks for having us on, and Merry Christmas. We'll step aside for a quick break. Back with more of the program after this local news with Mike Pava.